All right, so we've got the winner's rifle and optic here. We're getting ready to mount the optic, and I thought, you know what? Let's just make a quick video and just show you how we do it. I know whenever I first started mounting optics, I thought, man, this is way harder than what I was making it out to be. So basically, what we do, we're just using a two-bubble leveling system, and it's like I said, it's really not that difficult at all. So what we do, we use two different levels, two different bubble levels. We use one that goes right on the base itself. I've already mounted a Picatinny rail. We use a 20 MOA rail, give us a little bit extra elevation for reaching out to those extended distances. And then we have another bubble that goes on the end of the barrel, and basically you line the two up, keep them in the center, and start mounting your rings. Put your scope in the rings and start tightening them down. So as we get in a little bit more of the details, I'll explain more of it, but that is the gist of it, and it really doesn't take that long. All right, so the first thing that you want to do is, you see we've got our bubble level here. We've already got it on the base, and actually we're already pretty much centered. I've got it in a nice steady vise, so it's not going to go anywhere. So we know that we're level here at the base, which obviously is where the rings are going to go, and then the optics in the rings. But then down here, our next one, which I've also already got centered, this is just pure luck, I have it on the barrel. So that's going to be the one that I'm watching, because eventually what's going to happen is I'm going to end up having to take this bubble level off, and it is going to sit on top of the elevation dial of my optic. And that's how I'm going to know that I'm level, and I can keep an eye on the one at the end of my barrel. As long as it stays centered, I know that I'm level. So that's how you indicate, or actually how you're looking to see that your reticles are going to be straight up and down, not canted one side or the other, because if they are, then at your extended distances, you're going to be off whenever you're shooting. So that's how you're going to be able to make sure that your reticles are centered perfectly up and down. All right, so for mounting the rings, we are using Zeiss precision rings. For most of our Remington rifles, we are using low rings. They seem to work the best and fit for what we're needing. One of the things I wanted to show you, though, that is really cool that Zeiss has done, I wish more manufacturers would do this, but on the bottom of their rings, they actually put the torque specs for the base and for the rings themselves. So there's no guessing. You don't have to look it up online, and they have all the information for you right there. So also with this Zeiss ring, it does matter which one goes in front and which one goes in back, because the one closest to the shooter, we actually have a bubble level. And a bubble level lets you know if you are canting to the left or right. And again, for those extended distances, if you're canting one way or the other, you're going to be off your mark. So pretty cool idea from Zeiss. All right, so two things that I wanted to show you here real quick. One is eye relief, and so that has to do with one where we put the rings, so that whenever the shooter is looking through the optic, that they have the proper eye relief. Obviously, we don't have the winner here, but we'll put this the way that we do most of our range guns, and we've done tons of these, so we always put them in the same place. On the Model 7 is going to be pretty close to the way on Model 700 for Remington. So we know exactly where we need to put the rings onto the base. Now also with the rings, the base screws, always make sure that you put on your non-bolt side. So most guns are going to be right-handed action. So make sure that you've got the base screws on the opposite side. Now with these base screws, we already know that Zeiss suggests to have torque down to 36 inch-pounds. So that's what we're going to do. Adjust each one just a little bit at a time here. And we've got those set to where they need to be. So next thing we're going to do is we'll start putting the tops of the rings on. We're going to make sure that this is level and start tightening the rings down. All right, so now our bubble levels are going to come back into play. Here you can see the one that where we set everything with the bubble level on our barrel where we are still centered. Now we have our optic in, and we have our other bubble level sitting on the elevation turret, and this is where we're going to make our adjustments. We actually have it pretty much centered right now. That's going to start moving back and forth a little bit as I start putting the top part of the rings on, and as I start torquing it down, going from corner to corner, this bubble is going to move. I just have to make sure that is in center when I have everything tightened down. The other thing that you want to look for as well is your gaps in between your top ring and your bottom ring are even on both sides. You don't want to have it tightened down on this side and a big gap on the other side. So that's something to look for. So I'm sure that there are multiple right ways to mount optics onto your rifle, and there's probably a few wrong ways too, but one thing that is an absolute must is you have to use Loctite on your screws for your rings. If you don't, you'll pay for it in the long run because you'll start having bullets flying in different directions that you don't want them to go. Your groups are going to open up and you're going to try to figure out why, and more than likely it's going to be because the screw came loose because you didn't use a little bit of Loctite. So use some Loctite. All right, so one of the things that I do, obviously we want to get our Loctite on there. It doesn't take much. I put it down on the bottom part of the threads. But one of the things that I will do is I will work on just one set of the rings. I'll go ahead and get all 4 of the set screws in. Get them all Loctited before I start working on them. And then I will finish up the second one. The second one will be easy because you already have everything locked in. Everything should stay even. And I'm not having to work back and forth on 2 different sets. So, but the main thing is while we're working on this, is once you start getting everything where it's just a little bit snug and you'll feel it, is watching the bubble here and making sure that's staying even, because that's what's going to make your reticle straight up and down. So you just start on one corner. I'm keeping this pressed down onto the optic tube. And you can see I go from opposite corner to opposite corner. If you remember, like I mentioned earlier, you want to, one of the things that you definitely want to make sure of is that your gaps on either where the two, the bottom part of the ring and the top part of the ring meet up, is that your gaps are closing evenly. All while you're also keeping an eye on your bubble level to make sure it's staying centered. As this thing starts to snug down, that bubble will start to move. So as you tighten it on one side, it's going to move one direction. Then when you go back to the other side, it's going to move the other direction. So it's just something you want to keep an eye on. All right, so we've got both sets of rings tightened down. We've got Loctite on both of them. As you can see, our bubble level on our elevation dial is centered. Our original one that we have not moved is on the barrel is also centered. So our reticle should be perfectly level, vertical, and ready for the range. We're going to find out tomorrow.